everyone. Welcome to the Simply People podcast. This is season 1, The Magic of Generosity. I'm your host, Dax Vanderwall. And joining me on this odyssey of generosity
Odyssey,
is the
new
founder.
word. I like that.
ChatGPT came in clutch, 100%. I just said synonyms for journey and odyssey. I actually love that one. Odyssey of generosity. Todd Thacker. Everybody say hello to Todd Thacker. Even
Hello,
though
everyone.
We can't hear you at all. So
I appreciate it. And honestly, I think generosity is a bit of an odyssey. So I kind of like that, Dax.
Odyssey, and it rhymes. Odyssey of generosity. That could be a book right there.
Oh, there we go.
That's it. You heard it here first. So this is episode 8, which I don't know the percent. Oh, 80%. That's easy math.
Very
I was about
good.
to say I
Very
can't do
good. Your
that's
math
crazy.
is helpful.
That's quick math. 80% of the way through this odyssey, which is ridiculous, which is crazy. But this episode, I actually love that we're talking about this. And obviously this was birthed out of your mind in some way or someone's mind. But I really love that this made it into the 10 episodes. Today, we're going to talk about generosity and second chances.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple different angles at second chances we could talk about. But I just wanted to set us up for this and give a few examples of what this might mean. And I do think there's sort of core, like sometimes we've been generous. Maybe someone listening, you've been generous in some way with your money, with your time, but it didn't go well. Maybe you were taken advantage of. Maybe you gave money to a church and you felt like the pastor just had bought a Lamborghini with it and didn't steward it well. Or maybe you've been scammed in some way. Maybe even, I think this is one example that comes to mind often for me is sometimes when I want to give money to a homeless person, some people, well, that homeless person is just going to spend it on drugs. Right. Just going to do something wrong with it. Or of course your time. Maybe we give time to someone, we have coffee with someone, and then we just feel like, again, it was taken advantage of. The giving wasn't worth it. The generosity wasn't worth it. So that's kind of a lot. But have you had any bad experiences with giving?
Yeah, you know what, Dax? Thank you. I wasn't quite sure how you were going to tee this up, but and honestly,
was this a good tee up?
This is an excellent tee up and completely different than what I was expecting. But I think this is a super, super, super important point. And it was something that I learned pretty early once I started to take generosity serious. So I think we've talked about that you lived with me for 2 years. And part of that was because you were in a program through our church. And so over the course of 10 years, I had 40 kids live with me. And when I first started doing that, I mean, I thought at first that everyone raised their kids the way I raised my kids, so that they're going to know how to do dishes or wash their own clothes or whatever, et cetera. And what I quickly realized is that, no, we're all different and different families have different strengths and all this and that. And what I was originally doing as I started to open my home and open my heart was I was bearing the burden and the responsibility of your success or one of your peers' success or et cetera. And Chad, I've talked about a lot, and actually that's a good second chance subject later. Yeah. But the reality is very quickly, I think this is so important because I believe that if we're called to action, we're not called for results. We have a super strong faith and it's crazy to me that the God of the universe wants to use us to be an answer of prayer, but it's not necessarily about us. And so what I've learned, and I talked about it in one of the earlier episodes, when in Chicago, I tried to give the my money away, and one guy was politely said no, and the other one basically told me to go to hell and didn't want my money. And I'm like, I'm doing it. I guess I'm out of touch. And God's like, no, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And so where I think, so a perfect example, giving money to homeless. If I feel if I'm called to ask to do it, my responsibility is to do it. I'm not responsible for the results. And so I would encourage everyone, I agree with you. Anyone that's had a bad experience, I'm super sorry. I mean, and there are, unfortunately, and it's getting worse. There are scams out there where people are being taken advantage of left and right. I know you have personal experience with that. And that's just wrong. But I want to encourage people that shouldn't stop you. Don't let yourself be robbed of the joy and the fulfillment that a life of generosity can bring. And so what I try to do is if I feel it and I give it to homeless, and I've given to homeless, and all of us will buy more homeless than we have money to help. But I've given money and watched them go to the liquor store, and but I try not to judge them. I felt called to do it, and I have to honor that. I tell you, one time I was with there was a lady in Folsom, which is a little town by where we live. Johnny Cash did a song about Folsom Prison, and that's close to where we live. And there was a lady there that I figured out was homeless, and I gave her some money, and I was having dinner with one of the other Thrive kids, and I saw her go to the ice cream stop and get an ice cream cone, and it made me happy, that's what she's supposed to do. So we gave her some more money. I think I sent the kid over and said, give her another $10 or $20 or whatever. And while we were sitting there, she went and got a second ice cream cone. And I thought that was cool. Now, I could judge and go, why didn't you use it for a place to stay or whatever? But it shouldn't be that way. So I want to encourage people that if it's on your heart to do it, but don't do it with expectation. Do it out of a generous heart and trust. I mean, I don't know if I've said this yet or not, but I think more times than not, we're called to be a straw. And the straw that breaks the camel's back, that means that it's just one straw breaks the camel's back. But the reality is, how many straws have to go before that? And we never know, someone that you may give money to that goes into the liquor store and buys alcohol, and if God's asked you or you're being asked, you feel that nudge, that urging to do it, then I would encourage you to do it, and don't worry about why you're being asked to do it. And who knows when that someone else will get to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But if all those other straws hadn't gone first, the camel's back's not going to break.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Yeah, so that's a good job of visualizing the money specifically, which is good. I mean, regardless of how that person spends the money, they're accountable to God. Right. And so God is ultimately, if we say like, okay, God is actually the judge of people's hearts and minds, right. That's kind of what this is. Right. It's like, their stewardship is up to them, but I have to be a steward with what God has blessed me with, which means giving. Okay,
so we talked about giving. Let's talk about time for a second.
Yeah.
So I meet with a lot of kids, you know that, and I mentor a lot of kids, and it's super, 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 super rewarding. I mean, it's easy to see what I'm doing typically for students, and maybe a little bit harder out to see how God's using them for me. Yeah. But one of the things where I've come on that is I've got my own kids. I don't need more kids. If you want to do it, people will seek me out, want to meet, but they may not want to do the work. So at some point, it's just like I may not be as responsive, and I try to be open and willing, to whatever. But if you're not willing to do your part, then that is a form of tough love, and tough love is a good thing for people. And I think honestly, in mentoring, I can say a lot of things probably that aren't very different from what parents may have said. But because I don't have the history, I don't have the baggage, I don't have all that, I think sometimes people are more willing to hear it.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, and that's good. Sorry to cut you off real quick, but that is good because there are some people, maybe you've given them time, you've mentored them a little bit, they weren't willing to put in the work.
Right.
It's okay to say, this person isn't really putting in the work.
Right.
And so this isn't necessarily the best use of this time, of this generosity.
Right.
And so even if people are listening, maybe you have given money or time toward a specific person or relationship. Maybe they haven't reciprocated that. I think what we're saying is it's okay to acknowledge that. Maybe you don't give to that person in the same way.
Right.
But you can't let that fear stop you from giving at all.
Right.
Being generous at all.
Well, hopefully you won't, because then you're I would say in that situation, you're allowing Satan to stop you from what actually is a really amazing thing in my life or in all of our lives, that a generous heart and an act of generosity. And, I'll have some kids that will reach out to me, and I have one that's jumping in my mind. He reached out to me a lot, and I'm trying to be very discerning as to whether or not I need to respond. And if I feel it, I absolutely will. But I can't tell you how many times when I haven't felt that immediate need to respond, he'll text me back and say, hey, I already took care of it. Thank you. So, there's a balancing act. Trust your instincts, but I really love what you said, Dax. Don't let a bad experience rob you of the gift and joy of generosity. Stop. We're not called to bang our head against the wall. If you've been asked to do it and it's not working, then move on. And maybe that's what that person needs too. And, and I have tried to be, if someone, because I'm pretty upfront with them. I'm just like, look, I'm not, I do have my own kids. I don't need more kids. If you want to do this, I want to help you, but I can't do it for you. And then I have moved on. Mm-hmm. But then also, I've had kids that a month or a year or 5 years later will come back. I have a kid that has reached out to me a few times over the last probably 5 years. And then before we've actually gotten together, he's like, Todd, I know what it means to meet with you, and I'm not ready. So
wow.
I respect that too.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's very honest.
But he knows my heart, and he knows I'm fighting for him. But he also knows I can't do it for him.
Yeah, that's super good. Yeah, well, you don't necessarily have to go into the whole story unless you want to. But I do think that the Chad story is, I do think some people would have written Chad off for what he's done, what he's been through.
Right.
But he was the product of a second chance. And in some way, I mean, we all are. That's what grace is. Grace is undeserved favor.
That's right.
So at some level, it might seem like I'm contradicting what I just said. On the one hand, there's this don't cast your pearls to pigs, is what scripture says.
Right.
So like, if you have valuable wisdom or time, you need to be wise with how you spend it. But also, you didn't deserve grace. I didn't deserve grace.
Right.
We don't in general. And so, I don't know. How did you decide, you know what, Chad is, this person is worth it, even though many would probably give up?
Right. You know what? Oh my goodness. I had a few false starts with Chad, and I'm going to jump to when he left rehab. So I think I've already talked about Chad and that I got him back on Thanksgiving Day, and he was pathetic, face down, drooling, like whatever. I prayed about it on the way there. The only word that came to me, no. Told him no for an hour, and then he's like, well, you at least drop me off at church. And so then I took him, and then he was sober for 40 days. I had to be with him time, and I couldn't basically leave my sight. Let him out of my sight. Took him to the office with me. Again, there's an act of generosity. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or anything like that, but he needed that. And so then he gets into rehab, and the deal with rehab is that if you pick up the phone to call someone to leave, just touching the phone, then you're out. You don't even have to make the call. You go, you pick up, you say, I want the phone because I want to leave.
Wow.
And so anyway, so my deal with Chad was that, and this was before I remarried. I have 4 daughters. And my deal with Chad was, if you finish rehab, you can come back and live with me. And, and again, I have 4 daughters. So they're watching what I'm doing with Chad, and I can't treat Chad differently than I treat my kids. But so anyway, I was traveling in Chicago. Chad picked up the phone. I'm like, dude, he goes, Todd, it's too late. I picked up the phone. I'm leaving. And I want you to know I'm going to use tonight. Well, I was able to get a hold of my neighbors. I was in Chicago for work. I was getting back the next day. Was able to get a hold of my neighbors through 3 hours of conversations, was able to convince him. They were able to intercept him, convince him that he wouldn't use until after we talked the next day. And I was hurt. I'd invested a lot of time and energy, and I was hurt. And I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to help him, but but honestly, when we talked, you could just hear the hurt in my voice, which frustrated me and everything. And honestly, this is a cool thing. And I think a lot of people don't get that. I had another kid that was a Thrive kid that was living with me who was 18 years old. And, he'd come home and tell me these things. I'm like, what about this? And he'd be like, yeah, no, we're good. I mean, whatever I said was never the right answer. But so I had this conversation with Chad. I was super hurt. I didn't know what to do. And I said to this other kid, what would, I don't know what to do. And he goes, why don't you ask Chad what he would do if he was you? I'm like, okay, that's really good advice. So I did that. And then like 3 minutes later, Chad's like, I know. I said, no. And honestly, I was hurt and I was frustrated. And I was tired and, all these things. And I'm like, Chad, no, you need to sleep on it. You need to pray about it. We can talk about it in the morning. So in the morning, and I said to him, one of the things I said to him, I said, I know it is not God's will for you to leave rehab. There's just no way. You have come too far. He had been sober since Thanksgiving. He'd been in rehab since January 1st. And this was like the middle of July, or actually it was a little bit later than that. It was early August. And so anyway, the next day, Chad starts crying. He's like, Todd, I need to go back to rehab. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I don't want to use, I need your help to make sure I don't use, but I don't want to use. I said, okay, Chad, if we're still on the journey of rehab, you can stay with me. So, and I can explain that to my kids, and all that. And so in that time, he got to be best man at his brother's wedding. And it's kind of funny. He's like, I said, what are you going to say? He goes, oh, I'm just going to wing it. I said, no, you're not. He goes, yeah, that's how we do it. I said, well, no, not if you leave from my house. If you're best man leaving from my house, that speech will be in your pocket. He tried to convince me I didn't understand. I said, you're not winning this. So the speech was in his pocket. He goes, well, I might want to pray for them. I was like, well, that's between you and God. You can pray for them. So he read his speech and then he prayed for him. And it was awesome. And we went to celebrate recovery every night. His sister, they would play basketball. They got to go to that. He had an uncle that did all these things for him. He got to go do that. He got to go to his aunt's Bible study and share his testimony, including some, when he had left rehab in the November before and he was out in LA, he had been raped. And he shared that too, which thank God that he shared that because I knew that. I didn't know if his family knew that, but they heard that. And anyway, there was another family wedding I got to go to. And from 13 to 18, Chad's only 18 at this time, scowl on his face, every picture, just a scowl. And there's just these picture after picture. His stepdad was like, I want what he has because the Holy Spirit was oozing out of him. Everyone he ran into, he's like, can I pray for you? And then, all this. And so anyway, Chad goes back to rehab and he's there a month. And then he's trying to help someone else and doesn't like how that person's being treated, leaves rehab, shoots up and dies. And what I realized is that thank goodness I gave him a second chance because that was God's plan. Because I was so sure that was not God's plan, but the reality was it was absolutely God's plan because God knew that if he came to me, he would be safe. And we went to every night that he was not doing something with family or whatever, then he was at Celebrate Recovery, sharing his story, sharing his faith, sharing his journey with raw candor and honesty. And it was amazing. And now his whole family and everyone that knew him knew Happy Chad, knew Chad filled with faith. And yeah, he still lost his battle with addiction. But a second chance gave all those people the opportunity to spend time with him before they lost him and see what an amazing young man he was. And so that is probably one of my best stories of second chance. And where I totally didn't understand because I was 100% sure that there was no way that was God's will for him to leave rehab. And yet it was the perfect thing. And then the crazy thing, Chad lost, and I think I've said this before, but God's still using Chad today in powerful ways to touch lives. And to your point, I think at one point you thought that you could call that a ripple effect. And I thought, oh, that's a brilliant idea. Maybe I'll steal it.
Thank you for giving me credit.
You're welcome, Dax.
No. That's definitely the ripple effect of relationship. And I think to anyone listening, I think there's probably someone in your life and in my life who could use a second chance. Maybe someone that we've just cut off, maybe someone that we've just canceled. Maybe there's a coworker that just really annoys you and that you're like, I don't want to spend time talking to that person. I think those are just really simple ways to be generous with time, with you never know what that person's going through. And sometimes being generous isn't the most fun thing to do. Maybe it is a little bit of a sacrifice. Maybe it is like, oh, that person drains me. Spending time with them is hard. But it's an amazing opportunity
feeling right
to be
now?
generous. No, not at all.
Okay,
good. And so, who in your life right now might need a second chance? I think that's a great reflection question.
And this is kind of a tangent. Maybe you could see it as a tangent, a generosity or whatever, but I don't think it really is. And honestly, Dax, is forgiveness. And, with my divorce, I didn't have a vote in what my ex-wife wanted to do. Okay. And it was a journey for me to a forgiveness. And I wanted to do an intervention to try to stop it. And I drove down to Santa Barbara and saw my mother-in-law. And, it just became, my mother-in-law when we had a great evening, my ex-wife and I had a big fight on the phone. And as I was driving home that night, I just felt like God's like, there is an intervention here and it's for you. And Todd, you need to, I know you're hurt or whatever, but even when we're hurt, even when you're right or wrong, or in the right or whatever, that you're called to have a Christ-like response, and you're not doing that. And if you're not going to do that, then you're going to land yourself in a place that I don't think that's truly who you want to be. So you were right. There was the intervention, but it wasn't for Karen. It was for you. And that was a really cool thing. And because I started praying for her, I started praying for her boyfriend and all these things. And, but by the time that I was divorced, and it was a process, and it was because of me. And honestly, I was trying to do it God's way. The world's like, this and this and this, you got to do that. Jesus flipped over tables. Faith isn't a call to timidity or whatever, but that wasn't what was on my heart. And what was really cool is that by the time I was divorced, I had not become a victim. I didn't lose myself in the process. My faith was stronger than it ever been. And I liked me more than I ever liked me. So those were the results of what I would say was a call for me to be generous for me. And like you said before, we've talked about that, we're all forgiven, we all live under grace. Absolutely. And that even in difficult times, we're called to grace. And, but the results for me, were profound. And the reality is, if I hadn't got divorced, we wouldn't be doing this podcast right now, because I would never vote my house to thrive. I don't think I would have changed my priorities. I don't think I would have embraced generosity the way that I have, and all those things. So
absolutely.
Out of something really hard, because I tried to do it, I was being asked to do it, because I tried to. Then today I can look back, I didn't understand it in the process of it. And so often, I think that's a really important point. So often when we're in the middle of things, it's so hard to have the discernment, to have the perspective that what potential opportunities may be. But I can look back and say, this is crazy.
I think forgiveness is, I love that. That's actually very practical. Forgiveness is a way to give people a second chance, to be generous, even though it might be difficult. And also, there was another practical thing you said in there. If you're having only one, well, I'm saying two now, but we'll see if we can get a third in there. But if you're having trouble forgiving someone, and you're like, I don't think this person or even this organization deserves another chance, whatever it is, or this pastor or whatever, try to pray for that person. Right. I think there's something really powerful in that. When you take the time to actually show a level of compassion toward them and pray for them, you might be surprised at how much you feel for them and realize, wow, this is what forgiveness is like. This is the power of it. So I would definitely encourage that.
And I'll just throw into that, from my experience, forgiveness, judgment, the more I forgive, the less I judge, then people and circumstances that may have hurt me or let me down or disappointed me, then they have less power over me.
Absolutely.
And that came from
That's
forgiveness.
Where the freedom comes.
That's right. The freedom comes. And the reality is counterintuitive, but that's what's holding your heart hostage. If we can't forgive or whatever, then our heart's being held hostage. And my heart was, I was hurt, and I didn't know what to do with it. And
so episode 8, how generosity brings second chances, even if you've had bad experiences with giving. How would you tie this episode with a nice little bow, a nice little tweetable? Just all in all, what would be your encouragement on this topic?
I think that, oh my gosh, I think we all deserve a second chance. We've all needed a second chance in our life. Yeah. And honestly, this is, oh my gosh, this is crazy thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to talk about George Floyd for just a second. And, all those circumstances are a horrible situation. Just truly, truly, truly. But I didn't believe that all of our individual knee-jerk responses are what that was about. It was very interesting to me. I've always wondered, like you read Revelation and whatever, how can all those things happen? And COVID hit and our world shut down in 20 minutes, And then with our world
crazy.
shut down, there was a spotlight on the United States, and boom, this horrible thing happens, and people are on all sides of it. And you had three people there. You had a victim, you had the police officer, and you had the bystanders. And we're all so quick to have a knee-jerk response. And what I did as I evaluated that and thought that through, I realized there have been times in my life when I've been the victim. There have been times in my life where I've been the police officer, maybe not as drastic of a situation. Mm-hmm. And there are times in my life when I've been a bystander where I was paralyzed to jump in because I didn't know what to do, etc. And by realizing that I had played all those roles, it's a lot easier for me to open up and find a second chance and want to give others a second chance. Because guess what? There have been times in my life when I needed a second chance too. And so it's the journey of second chances is super fun, and it's super rewarding, and it can be a blessing to someone. And all I know is that, again, with Chad, which is the biggest, or even with my divorce, those second chances that I gave actually just blessed me and enriched me. And, with the divorce, my kids and I had a great relationship all the way through that because I tried to do it the right way. The whole Chad thing was just an amazing, amazing experience. Yeah, I was sad when Chad died, but I certainly didn't. I didn't doubt God in that. It was funny because when Chad made it safe, when I've talked about that, Chad made it safe for me to love again because while I was so busy helping him, I took the wall down around my heart. But Chad also made it safe for me to lose again, and that was okay. And I never doubted God, and it's just really cool that we're talking about Chad today, and the ripple effect, to quote you, in this Odyssey is quite amazing.
Come on. Quote me twice in one sentence.
I know.
That is wild.
That's a pretty good bow if you're asking me.
That was it. That was
Thank
it.
you.
That's such a blessing. And I'm really happy we got to talk about this in this episode, just these bad experiences. And I just want to say one more common theme that I'm seeing in all of this. A lot of it does come down to compassion, which is oftentimes the opposite of judgment.
Right.
A lot of times we're not generous. And we don't want to give our time, our resources, whatever.
Right.
Honestly, just because we're judging that person or we're being super judgmental.
Right.
But if we just took a moment, and even back to your example about COVID, if we all took a moment to show some compassion toward each individual involved in a situation,
right,
how much better would our conversations? How much more generous would we be? How easier would it be to forgive if we just took those moments? So I love that. Is there any final words you got?
No, I was just going to say, and when we do that, it just creates an opportunity to grow and to just, again, I talk about it as a roller coaster. That's part of the roller coaster. But that's where the joy in the roller coaster comes, is from those things and having conversations, not conflict. Let's have conversations. And how can we learn and grow from that?
Absolutely.
And I'll say one more thing. So second chances or whatever. When I turned 65, we had a birthday party, and Angie's like, "Who do you want to have?" I'm like, "Well, I want my friends, but I want all of you guys too." And so there were about 90 people there, and about 30 of them were people, Angie's my age, and the rest were people that I had mentored to come alongside of or whatever. And what was really cool is the 30 people that were my age, they had all seen and watched me go through all the things that I had gone through. And it was really, really cool for me to let them see this is the fruit of what a really bad thing that happened to me, but how I chose to give myself a second chance. And I guess we didn't talk about that, but giving yourself a second chance, forgiving ourselves, not judging ourselves, and actually giving ourselves a second chance and being open to that. That's just as powerful and important as doing that for others. So there we go.
Amen. That was a great bow on top of the bow on top of the bow. That's what I'm talking about.
Is it almost Christmas?
It's I love that. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to episode 8 of The Magic of Generosity. If you haven't yet, share this podcast with someone that you know and love. And whatever platform you're using, go ahead and follow Simply People on Instagram, on YouTube, all the above. And this journey, this odyssey, this adventure, some might say, is almost over. Just a couple episodes left. So we'll see you next episode in episode 9. And yeah, goodbye.